The judge's gavel came down like a gunshot. 3 times. My ex-wife Margaret walked out with the house, the cabin at Lake Simcoe, and what was left of our savings after her lawyer took his cut. Her brother-in-law, some slick corporate attorney from Toronto, looked at me across that courtroom like I was something he'd scraped off his shoe. Which, I guess I was, about 2 months later, when my granddaughter Emma and I moved into the Gateway Transitional Housing on Queen Street East with everything we owned in the back of my old Ford pickup. I was 63 years old, Emma was 14, and we were homeless. The shelter wasn't the worst place. I've seen worse, done worse jobs in my life. But lying there at night on those narrow cots, listening to Emma trying not to cry into her pillow, watching her do her homework under those fluorescent lights that hummed like angry wasps, that cut deeper than any wound I'd taken in my 30 years as a lineman for Ontario Hydro. I'd climbed towers in ice storms, worked live wires in howling winds, and none of it scared me like watching my granddaughter eat powdered eggs for breakfast because it was free. The divorce hadn't just taken the house. It took my reputation. Margaret's family made sure everyone in our circle knew I was the failure, the deadweight, the man who couldn't provide. Her sister's husband, Brian Hutchinson, he'd been whispering poison for years, called me obsolete, said I was dragging Margaret down. When I took the buyout from Ontario Hydro 3 years back, he'd laughed right to my face. What are you going to do now, Dave? 50 grand and a handshake? That won't last you 2 years. He was right. It lasted 18 months. Then Margaret filed. Then her lawyers buried me. Emma came to live with me 6 months before the divorce. Her mother, my daughter Sarah, she'd been struggling with addiction since Emma was small. Opioids first, then worse. Emma's father had never been in the picture. When Children's Aid got involved, Sarah called me from some motel in Thunder Bay and said, "Dad, can you take Emma? Just for a while. I need to get clean." That was 2 years ago. Sarah's still up north somewhere. Calls once every few months. Promises she's better. Never is. Margaret didn't want Emma. Said it straight out in mediation. I raise my children, David. I'm not raising hers. So the judge gave me custody, looked at my financials, and probably wondered how long before I'd be back in his courtroom, losing Emma to the system. But the social worker, Mrs. Chen, she came to the shelter twice. Checked Emma's grades. Asked if we felt safe. Looked at Emma's neat schoolwork, her clean clothes, the way she organized our little corner of that room with military precision. "You're doing well, Mr. Thornton," Mrs. Chen said. "Better than most. Keep doing what you're doing." What I was doing was driving for Uber Eats 12 hours a day. My union pension wouldn't start until 65, and the buyout money was gone. At 63, with a bad knee and hands that ached in cold weather, nobody wanted to hire me. I sent out 47 applications that first month, got 3 interviews. All ended the same way. You're overqualified, which means you're too old. But Uber Eats didn't care about my age. The algorithm didn't care about my gray hair or my limp. It just cared if I showed up. So I showed up. Emma helped me figure out the app, showed me how to optimize routes. Smart kid. Had a head for numbers like her grandfather. My brother Arthur, God rest him, he'd been the real genius with figures. Worked as an accountant his whole life. Bought rental properties all over Toronto. Never married. No kids. When he died 5 years back, I'd been too deep in my own mess to pay much attention to the estate. Margaret handled it. Said Arthur left everything to some conservation trust. Said there'd been debts. I'd signed papers I barely read. "Don't worry about it, David," Margaret had said. "I'm taking care of everything. You just focus on work." I should have asked questions. Should have looked at those papers, but I was drowning back then, picking up double shifts, trying to make the buyout money stretch, trying to keep Sarah's addiction from killing her, trying to hold our lives together. So I trusted Margaret. Why wouldn't I? We'd been married 38 years. It was a Thursday afternoon in late January when everything changed. I just dropped off an order at some condo building near the Danforth when my phone rang. Unknown number. "Mr. Thornton? David Thornton?" "Speaking." "My name is Joanna Kim. I'm calling from Kim and Associates Property Management. I'm trying to reach you about the Rosedale building." I shifted the truck into park, confused. "I think you have the wrong number." "Is this David Arthur Thornton, formerly of 87 Weston Road?" "Yes." "But, Mr. Thornton, I manage a 6-unit apartment building at 42 Maple Avenue in Rosedale. You're listed as the owner. We've been sending monthly reports to an accounting firm, Morrison and Garrett Associates, per the instructions in your file. But I received a call yesterday from one of your long-term tenants, Mrs. Kowalski, and she mentioned she saw you delivering food to her neighbor's unit. She was confused why you'd be working delivery when you own the building. That's when I started looking more carefully at our records. My hands went numb. I don't own any building. Mr. Thornton, I have the deed right here. Arthur David Thornton left the property to you in his will, filed with the Ontario Superior Court in 2021. It's been in your name for 5 years. The property generates approximately $23,000 per month in rental income. All payments have been going to Morrison and Garrett Associates, with instructions to distribute to you. Have you not been receiving these payments? The truck suddenly felt very small. No, I haven't received anything. My wife, my ex-wife now, she handled my brother's estate. She said there was nothing, said he left everything to charity, said there were debts. Silence on the line. Then Joanna Kim's voice, very careful. Mr. Thornton, there were no debts. And the property is quite valuable. Would you like me to email you the documentation? I think you need to see this. I sat in that truck for 20 minutes, reading the files she sent. The deed, the will, 5 years of accounting reports, showing rent collected, expenses paid, and net income distributed to an account I'd never seen. Over $1 million, gone. Emma was waiting at the shelter when I got back. She took one look at my face and closed her laptop. Grandpa? I sat down on my cot, told her everything, watched her face go through the same shock, confusion, and then anger I was feeling. Morrison and Garrett, she said slowly. Wasn't that Uncle Brian's firm? Mom's uncle? Brian Hutchinson, Margaret's sister's husband, the corporate lawyer, the one who'd called me obsolete. Yeah, I said, that's his firm. Emma opened her laptop, started searching, found Morrison and Garrett Associates in 30 seconds, found Brian Hutchinson's name as senior partner, found his photo on the firm website, smiling in a $15,000 suit. Grandpa, Emma said, her voice shaking, he stole from you. Aunt Margaret's family stole over $1 million from you while we've been living here. The rage came slow, not hot and fast, but cold and deliberate. The kind of rage that's been building for years under layers of shame and failure and believing you deserved your circumstances. We need a lawyer, I said. That's when Emma showed me the real reason she'd been so quiet on her laptop lately. She'd been researching, finding legal aid resources, reading Ontario property law. My 14-year-old granddaughter had been trying to figure out how to save us while I'd been too busy surviving to notice she was already fighting. She'd found a legal clinic at Osgood Hall, found a lawyer named Maria Santos, who specialized in estate fraud. Emma had already emailed her our story 2 days ago. Maria wanted to meet with us the next morning. Maria Santos looked at the documents Joanna Kim sent, then looked at me across her desk like she was calculating how much fight I had left. Mr. Thornton, this is textbook fraud. Your brother's will is crystal clear. The property went to you, unencumbered. Someone forged power of attorney documents, set up a shell account, and has been stealing your rental income for 5 years. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. Can you prove it? With what Miss Kim sent? Absolutely. The paper trail is surprisingly clear. Mr. Hutchinson got sloppy. He probably thought you'd never find out. She leaned forward. But I need to ask you something difficult. Your ex-wife. How much did she know? I'd been asking myself that same question since yesterday. Margaret. 38 years. 3 kids. A life. I don't know, I admitted. Brian's her sister's husband. They're close. But Margaret's not a thief. She's a lot of things, but not that. We need to find out, Maria said. Because if she knew, she's complicit. If she didn't, she might be willing to testify against her family. Either way, we need to talk to her. Margaret was living in Oakville now, remarried already, some retired executive she'd met at her sister's country club. When Maria called her, Margaret agreed to meet. I think she was curious, maybe guilty. Maybe she wanted to see how far I'd fallen. We met at a Tim Hortons in Mississauga, neutral ground. Margaret walked in looking exactly like the woman I'd married, just older, grayer, and wearing clothes that cost more than I used to make in a month. She sat down across from Maria and me, saw Emma standing by the door, and something flickered across her face. Why is Emma here? Because she lives with me, I said. You remember. You didn't want her. Margaret flinched. Good. Maria opened her folder. Mrs. Bennett, we need to ask you about David's brother's estate. Arthur's estate? Margaret looked confused. What about it? Did you handle the probate? Brian handled it. He offered to help, since David was so busy with work. I just signed whatever he needed me to sign. Maria slid a document across the table. Did you sign this? A power of attorney giving Morrison and Garrett Associates control over David's inheritance? Margaret picked it up, read it, and her face went white. No. Brian had me sign estate documents, but he said they were just formalities for the Conservation Trust. He said Arthur left everything to protect the Greenbelt. He said there was nothing for David except a small personal effects distribution. Mrs. Bennett, your brother-in-law lied to you. Arthur left David a commercial property in Rosedale worth approximately $2 million. It's been generating income for 5 years, over $1.3 million, all of it diverted to an account controlled by Brian Hutchinson. Margaret stared at the paper like it was written in a language she didn't recognize. Then she looked at me, really looked at me, saw the shelter address on the documents in front of Maria, saw my worn jacket and scuffed boots, saw Emma by the door in clothes from the Goodwill. Oh my God, she whispered. David, you've been homeless. 9 months, I said quietly. Emma and I have been living in a shelter for 9 months. Your family's been living off my inheritance, while my granddaughter ate donated food. Tears started rolling down Margaret's face. Not delicate, pretty tears. Ugly, choking sobs. I didn't know. David, I swear, I didn't know. Brian said, he told me Arthur's estate was settled, that there was nothing left after debts and charitable bequests. He showed me papers. I trusted him. Karen's my sister. He's family. Why would I question? She stopped. Looked at Emma. Oh God, Emma, you've been taking care of Emma in a shelter. No, Emma said from the doorway, her voice hard. Grandpa's been taking care of me. You left us to take care of ourselves. Margaret broke down completely then. Maria handed her tissues, waited until she could breathe again. Mrs. Bennett, I need to know. Will you testify about what Brian told you? Will you help us prove this fraud? Margaret wiped her eyes, and I saw something I hadn't seen in years. The woman I'd married. Not the country club wife she'd become, but the woman who'd raised 3 kids on a lineman's salary and never complained when I came home covered in grease and ice. Yes, she said. I'll testify. I'll tell them everything. Karen's my sister, but what they did, she looked at Emma. What they did is unforgivable. Maria worked fast. Within a week, she'd filed a civil suit against Brian Hutchinson, Morrison, and Garrett Associates, and Karen Hutchinson, for fraud, theft, forgery, and breach of fiduciary duty. She'd also contacted the Law Society of Ontario and the Ontario Provincial Police Fraud Division. Criminal charges followed 3 days later. Brian tried to fight it, hired the best lawyers his stolen money could buy, claimed the power of attorney was legitimate, that I'd signed it and forgotten, that I was senile and confused. His lawyers painted me as a bitter ex-husband trying to blame my failures on Margaret's successful family. But Maria had something better than expensive lawyers. She had the truth, and she had proof. The document examiners proved the power of attorney signatures were forged. The forensic accountants tracked every dollar from the Rosedale building to Morrison and Garrett Associates to accounts controlled by Brian and Karen Hutchinson. The digital trail was perfect. Rent checks, wire transfers, expense reports, all of it carefully documented and all of it fraudulent. Mrs. Kowalski, my brother's tenant, who'd recognized me doing food delivery, she testified. 82 years old, sharp as a tack, and furious. Arthur Thornton was a good man, she told the court. He maintained that building perfectly. He told me his brother David was going to inherit it, that David would take care of us the same way he did. Then Arthur died, and suddenly everything changed. Maintenance requests ignored, cheap repairs. I asked questions, and I was told the new owner was restructuring. I asked to speak to David Thornton, and I was told he'd signed over management authority. Then I saw David delivering Thai food to my neighbor's condo, looking like he'd aged 10 years. That's when I knew something was wrong. A man who owns a building in Rosedale doesn't deliver food for minimum wage unless something terrible has happened to him. Margaret testified too. Told the court about the papers Brian had her sign, the lies he'd told about charitable trusts and debts. She cried on the stand. I didn't, Emma testified. My granddaughter, 14 years old, stood in front of that courtroom and told them about living in the shelter, about doing homework under fluorescent lights, about watching her grandfather work 12-hour days while Brian Hutchinson drove past them in his BMW on his way to the cottage they'd bought with stolen money. My grandfather is the strongest man I know, Emma said. He took me in when nobody else wanted me. He kept me safe and fed and in school while we had nothing. Mr. Hutchinson had everything, and he stole more. I don't understand people like that. I don't understand how you can have so much and still need to take from someone who has nothing. The judge, Justice Patricia Morrison, she watched all of this with the expression of someone who'd seen every kind of human evil and had run out of surprise long ago. When it was Brian's turn to testify, he tried to play it smooth. Said there'd been a series of unfortunate miscommunications. Said the accounting firm had made errors. Said he'd been trying to protect Arthur's legacy. Said I'd been unstable after the divorce and he'd been concerned about my ability to manage property. Maria destroyed him. Showed the jury bank statements. Showed the Hutchinsons' purchases, the Muskoka cottage, the boat, the BMW, the private school tuition for their kids, the European vacations, all of it paid for with money stolen from a man living in a shelter. Mr. Hutchinson, Maria said, you called David Thornton obsolete. You told people he was dragging your family down. You wanted him gone from Margaret's life, and when you got the chance to make sure he stayed gone, to make sure he stayed poor and broken and out of the way, you took it. You didn't just steal his money. You stole his dignity. You stole 5 years of his life. You stole his granddaughter's childhood. And you did it while telling yourself you were the successful one, the smart one, the one who deserved more. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Justice Morrison didn't smile, but I saw satisfaction in her eyes when she read the sentence. Mr. Hutchinson, you held a position of trust as an attorney and financial advisor. You exploited that trust to commit systematic fraud against a family member for your own enrichment. You showed no remorse, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and no concern for the harm you caused. This court sentences you to 8 years in federal prison, restitution of $1.3 million plus interest and damages, and permanent disbarment. Mrs. Hutchinson, you participated knowingly in this fraud. This court sentences you to 5 years in federal prison and joint restitution. Morrison and Garrett Associates was dissolved. The firm's partners who'd known about the fraud faced their own charges. The ones who hadn't known faced professional ruin by association. The properties Brian had bought with stolen money were seized. The cottage, the boat, everything. Sold at auction to pay restitution. I got a check from the court administrator 6 weeks later. $1.7 million. Principal, interest, damages, and 5 years of lost rental income. Emma and I were still in the shelter when it cleared the bank. Mrs. Chen was doing her monthly check-in when I showed her the balance on my phone. Well, she said, smiling for the first time since I'd met her, I think you and Emma might want to start looking for an apartment. We didn't get an apartment. We moved into the Rosedale building, into a unit on the top floor that Arthur had kept vacant for family visits. Emma got her own room, windows that looked out over trees, space for a real desk for her schoolwork. I hired a proper property management company, but I stayed involved. Fixed things myself when I could. My hands remembered how to do electrical work, how to troubleshoot plumbing, how to solve problems. Mrs. Kowalski made us pierogi. Emma started inviting school friends over, something she'd never done at the shelter. Margaret called a few times, asked if we could talk, if she could see Emma. Emma wasn't ready. Maybe someday. She testified for you, I reminded Emma. She made things right. She also walked away when we needed her, Emma said. I'm not saying never. I'm just saying not yet. That's fair. Emma's a smart kid. She'll figure out forgiveness on her own timeline. I started a small business. Thornton Property Services. Hired other older guys. Men my age who'd been pushed out of trades when companies wanted younger workers. Men who knew their crafts and deserved better than being called obsolete. We do electrical work, maintenance, renovations. We're booked solid. Sarah called last month. Said she's been clean for 6 months. Wants to see Emma. We'll see. Emma will decide. On Friday nights, Emma and I have a routine now. We cook dinner together in our actual kitchen. Sometimes Mrs. Kowalski joins us. We talk about her week at school, about my work, about normal things, things that felt impossible a year ago. Last Friday, Emma asked me something I'd been expecting. "Grandpa, do you hate Mr. Hutchinson?" I thought about it. Really thought. "No," I said finally. "I'm angry about what he did, about the time we lost. But hate takes energy, and I need that energy for living. Brian's in prison. He lost everything. His career, his freedom, his family's respect. That's consequence enough. Do you think he learned anything? I don't know. Some people learn. Some people just get angry they got caught. But that's his problem now, not mine." Emma nodded. Then, "What about Margaret? Do you hate her?" Harder question. "I'm disappointed in her. She made choices that hurt you, and that's hard to forgive. But I don't think she understood what she was really doing until it was too late. People get caught up in family loyalty, in wanting to believe the best about people they love. Sometimes that loyalty blinds them." She opened her eyes eventually. "That counts for something. Would you take her back?" I smiled. "No, sweetheart. That part of my life is over. Margaret and I, we grew into different people. Maybe we always were different people and just didn't want to see it. But I don't hate her. I hope she finds happiness, just not with me." Emma helped me wash dishes. Quiet for a while. Then, "Grandpa, I'm really proud of you." "For what?" "For not giving up. For fighting back. For taking care of me when everyone else walked away. For showing me that doing the right thing matters, even when it's hard. I had to turn away so she wouldn't see me cry. You took care of me too, Emma. When I was ready to accept being broken, you kept believing things could get better. You found Maria. You did the research. You never stopped fighting. I'm proud of you too." She hugged me then, tight, and I thought about how close we'd come to losing everything, how Brian Hutchinson's greed had almost worked, how easy it would have been to just accept defeat, to believe I was really obsolete and worthless and deserving of nothing. But Emma hadn't let me believe that. Mrs. Kowalski hadn't let me disappear. Maria Santos had fought for me. Even Margaret, in the end, had chosen truth over family loyalty. I learned something in that courtroom, watching Brian try to justify his theft. I learned that some people measure success by what they take from others. They see the world as a competition where winning means someone else has to lose. They'll steal and cheat and lie because they believe they deserve more than you do. But I learned something else too. I learned that the people who matter, the people worth knowing, they're the ones who help you stand back up when you've been knocked down. They're the people who see you delivering food in your 60s and wonder why. Who care enough to ask questions. Who fight for you when you're too tired to fight for yourself. Mrs. Kowalski could have ignored me, could have kept collecting her rent and minded her business. She didn't. She asked questions. Maria Santos could have told me my case was too complicated, too expensive, not worth her time. She didn't. She fought. Emma could have resented me for the shelter, for the powdered eggs, for everything we lost. She didn't. She believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. That's the real lesson. Not that justice eventually prevails, though sometimes it does. Not that bad people always get punished, though sometimes they do. The real lesson is that you don't face these things alone. That asking for help isn't weakness. That verifying trust isn't paranoia. If I'd asked to see Arthur's estate documents 5 years ago, if I'd questioned Margaret when something didn't feel right, if I'd been less afraid of seeming difficult or suspicious, maybe none of this would have happened. But I was drowning, and I grabbed at anything that looked like a lifeline, even if it was just Margaret saying, "I'll handle it." That's what predators count on. They count on you being too tired, too overwhelmed, too trusting. They count on you not asking questions because questioning family feels wrong. But here's what I'd tell anyone facing something similar. Question everything. Verify everything. Love doesn't mean blind trust. Family doesn't mean accepting whatever they tell you without proof. When someone says, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it," that's exactly when you should worry. That's exactly when you should ask to see the documents, to understand the process, to verify every single step. And if you find yourself in trouble, if you discover you've been betrayed, don't be ashamed to ask for help. I was embarrassed to need a shelter, embarrassed to be delivering food at 63, embarrassed that my granddaughter saw me struggle, but that shame almost kept me from finding the truth. It almost let Brian win. There's no shame in being a victim of fraud. The shame belongs to the people who commit it. These days, I look at Emma doing her homework at her desk, in her own room, in our building, and I think about the alternative, about what would have happened if Mrs. Kowalski hadn't called Joanna Kim, if Emma hadn't found Maria Santos, if Margaret hadn't testified. We'd still be in that shelter, and Brian would still be driving his BMW to his stolen cottage. But that's not what happened. What happened was people cared enough to act, and that made all the difference. Emma graduates from high school in 4 years. She wants to study law, says she wants to be like Maria Santos, fighting for people who can't fight for themselves. I tell her she'll be magnificent at it. She already is. Arthur would be proud of us both. He left me that building not just as an asset, but as security, as a foundation to build on. Brian stole 5 years of that security, but he couldn't steal the future. That still belongs to us. And every morning when I wake up in our home, when I hear Emma singing in the kitchen making breakfast, when I see the sun rise through windows that are ours, I remember that justice came. It was slow. It was hard. It required help from people who didn't have to care, but chose to anyway. But it came. And that's worth remembering on the hard days. That's worth teaching Emma. That's worth sharing with anyone who's been knocked down and told they're worthless. You're not. Your trust was betrayed, not your value. Your circumstances changed, not your worth. And there are people out there, good people, who will help you stand back up if you let them. You just have to be brave enough to ask, brave enough to question, brave enough to fight. The rest will follow.